I actually feel genuinely sad for Peter Lawwell,
Hmm.
that he's had to leave like this. Um, but I have to say at the same time, I'm pleased for him that he has chosen to do it because it had to end. This couldn't go on. It was insufferable. It was impossible. The relationship with the fans is fractured to such a point it's never going to be recovered. He had to go, and I think for his own sanity, he had to get out of it. What I find sad for Peter Lawwell is that for the second time in his 20 years, whatever it's been at Celtic, he's having to leave out the back door, basically with his head under a blanket. Um, and I find that appalling, to be perfectly honest with you. I realise the Celtic fans, there's a disconnect with the board. I realise that Peter Lawwell was the bogeyman for a lot of them. But I think, Daniel, you know, I genuinely think fans at other clubs will be looking at this and just finding it so difficult to try and compute and process.
Hmm.
This is a guy who, over his stints as chief executive and chairman, 15 titles, 10 Scottish Cups, 9 League Cups, I think, or something like that. I think in total it's something like 38 trophies. There's been a quadruple treble in there, um, 12 domestic trophies on the spin. This is a guy that when he came into Celtic, and he's a Celtic fan, and I think that's where I think there's a sadness. This guy lives, breathes, sleeps, obsesses over Celtic, and has made it his life's work to try and improve the club. And when he went in the first instance, Celtic were second best in their own city, and here we are, 20 years down the line. They are the complete dominant force in Scottish football. Never mind Glasgow. Um, they've battered Rangers to a pulp over that period of time, and yet he's getting kind of hounded out, and there's threats to his family or suggestions about that. We know that his house, there was a really terrible security incident there not all that long ago. I just find it sad. I find it incredible, and I think if you look at his contribution to where Celtic are in terms of the trophies that have been piled up over these years, this period of unprecedented dominance, is flowers, there's petals that should be get thrown at Peter Lawwell, not abuse. You know, they shouldn't be bullying him out the back door. They should be building a statue to him at the front door. And yet here we are. As I said, Daniel, it had reached a point where there was no return, and I think he had to get out, and it was the only way. It's the it's the it's the start of some sort of possible process of peace for Celtic and the support. The supporters just weren't going to tolerate Peter Lawwell for a moment longer. And you see that there's more targets. They've got more people in their sights now. Look, Michael Nicholson. I can totally understand why they're opening fire on him, as I've called him. He's the invisible man of a chief executive. Chris Mackay, financial director. He's obviously getting it in the neck. Dermot Desmond, Ross Desmond, Paul Tisdale, all these guys. There's an argument as to I get this. I can totally understand. But Peter is a different category for me, given what he's done for the club. I just think it's incredible.
Yeah.
I think it's sad, but I think it was inevitable. It had to happen, and maybe by moving on, there can be a healing process. Um, Although I get the feeling that the Celtic supporters that this is just an appetizer for them. They want more. They want the change to go further. They want it to be more extreme. So I don't know. Does this solve anything? It probably feels like a small victory for the Celtic fans who have been demanding change, but it's nowhere near enough for them, is it? If you've seen all the other heads that are getting targeted, so I don't know. I just find it a real awkward one, a real difficult one to comprehend. And I think Peter's biggest mistake over all his time was probably he created a bit of a monster with the ultras and the Green Brigade and all this, and ultimately it came the monster came back and ate him towards the end of his time as chief executive, and it's now eating him for a second time. And you wonder if he had the. And it's ended in such a horrible way with the bad and the rancor between, and they're all Celtic supporters at the end of the day, and they're kind of tearing themselves to shreds on it. I don't know. I don't know. I just the whole thing feels just so avoidable. Just so avoidable. And I think that the board have to carry so much of the blame. Absolutely, they do for their failure over the last year or so to conduct themselves like a proper football club in the transfer market. Absolutely, and I can understand absolutely why the fans are tearing their hair out watching that. But I just feel it's a bit sad at the end of the day that Peter Lawwell, once again, for the second time in just a few years, has to exit out the back door, as I said, almost with his head under a blanket.
Yeah. Well, look, we've got comments coming in, and if you want to get involved, let us know your thoughts on Peter Lawwell's resignation and anything else that takes your fancy. Please do so in the comment section below. Before I come to a couple of them, Keith, let me read out a couple of Peter Lawwell's excellent comments today on the Celtic website.
This won't. This and by the way, Celtic have made a habit over the last wee while as well of shooting themselves in the foot with their statements and their press releases, and I can see already there's a angry backlash to the way that this has been presented publicly. So yeah, read them out. As I said, they're turning self-harming into a sort of art form right here, and I think the statement and some of the words that are involved in Celtic fans, I think, who want to take it in a certain context, will look at this statement that you're about to read out and think, there they are. Even on his way out the door, it's another attack on the Celtic fans. I don't think that's how it's meant to be perceived, but I can feel already that's probably the way it will be interpreted by people who have a different agenda.
It reads to me, Keith, just like Peter Lawwell has been honest. I mean, let me read this out. He says, abuse and threats from some sources have increased and it's now intolerable. They've dismayed an alumni family. At this stage of my life, I don't need this. I cannot accept this, and so I leave the club I have loved all my life. The motivations and aims of these detractors can be investigated by others. I prefer to look back at my career at Celtic with deep gratitude and satisfaction. He then talks about being a schoolboy on the terraces in Europe when the European Cup was paraded at Celtic in '67. He says he's watched some of the great European nights, points out that in all of the last 2 seasons, in the last 21 years, Celtic have played group stage European football. So, it reads to me like Peter Lawwell was just being honest, but some of the comments that are coming in, Keith, as you can imagine, there's some happy Celtic fans. Not everyone, to be fair, but let me read out a few of these and get your take. Marzuno says, I shed no tears. Thousands of our loyal fans are currently being collectively punished. Post Thought says, everyone and their dog could have dominated Scottish football in the last 10 years. Objective view from the outside country. There was no competition. I would just jump in there and say, is that Peter Lawwell's fault? Do you know what I mean? Craig Marshall says, chasing the man out of the club the way they did is absolutely wrong. This could go either way. It could break them. John says, Lawwell was part of a managed decline at Celtic in recent years. No tears here. Sing the Blues says the Celtic fan chased a man out. It's given them the most dominant period in their history. And Jungle Boy says some of the fans need to have a right good look at themselves. Personally,
it's a real mixed bag, isn't it?
It's a mixed bag, but I would fall personally on, and I feel like I'm going to get a lot of stick for this, but I would agree with Jungle Boy's sentiments there. I've got some friends, or Celtic fans as well, that are delighted today in the group chat, acting as though it's some red letter day for Celtic.
Well, be careful what you wish for.
Aye, exactly.
Is one of the things. Now, Peter was a little bit diminished, wasn't he? In the role as chairman, he wasn't as hands on as when he'd previously been the chief executive. So maybe it doesn't make all that much of a change. Maybe this is just a token that, and the hope is that it might bring some of the Celtic supporters back down from the precipice. I'm not sure that's going to work. I think if anything, it will just give them a wee bit more encouragement to push harder and strive for more change. So I don't know where the real benefit is going to be found on this one for Celtic.